Who knew this many people like music? Well, I did. Because we find music wherever there are people. Even the Piraha tribe of the Brazilian rainforest, they have no words for numbers, no words for colors, yet they have a rich, beautiful musical heritage. And we've been making music for a long time. Musical instruments, we start finding them around 40,000 years ago. This is my favorite from 30,000 years ago because it's carved from the tusk of a woolly mammoth. A flute that could play, I think, a complete diatonic scale, which shows real commitment to music making. Sorry I'm late for the gig, I was chasing a mammoth. And we keep making music to the present day, where we're swimming, if not drowning, in music. It would take more than one lifetime to listen to all of Spotify. I'm doing my best. And as much as it's wrapped up in our history of the planet, it's wrapped up in the history of our own personal lives. From the rhythms of the womb to our first mother's song, every birthday, every wedding, well, one or two, I don't know how many you have. And even at the funeral, we can't escape music. Every day in between, we turn to it like a dear friend to console us in our darkest moments and elevate our brightest ones. How does this happen? Lucky for us, we've got a lot of music to choose from. Basically, the planet is one big, unsupervised musical experiment. Plant some humans, spread them across the globe for hundreds of thousands of years, and see what music we make. So let's go to one of the end of these branches, to the relatively isolated Solomon Islands, which is in the Oceanic, largely untouched till about 200 years ago. And in 1969, the musicologist Hugo Zemp came with a newfangled tape player and recorded a lady called Afunakwa singing Ruraguela, a lullaby. I'm going to just play it to you. We'll play it, listen to a few verses, see what you make of it, and then we'll discuss it. I happen to find it really beautiful. More so when we translate the Biagru lyrics. There's only 6,000 people who speak this language, so you can't check if I'm wrong. But it tells of it's an older sibling talking to a younger sibling, let's say a sister talking to a brother, just after their parents have passed. And I'll try and get through it without crying. It's a low chance. And the older sister is saying, do not cry, I will carry you. Yes, our parents are dead, but they will watch over us. In the house and all of the gardens, they will watch over us with this endless lullaby. Do not cry, I will carry you. I made it. Whew. But let's discuss why it was accessible or even beautiful to you. So what we find, we could have found any music at all, but what we find here is sort of grammatical structure, two phrases that have been subdivided into parts. And you might also notice some repetition of rhythms and melodies, particularly this gorgeous dropping minor seventh. Love it. We also get what's called a melodic arch, which is very common, if not universal. And a set of pitches. We didn't have to have that, but we have a set of unique pitches. These are a pentatonic scale, which you can mimic on the black keys of a piano. But it's also adorned with these beautiful coloring notes, which imply a Lydian dominant, for any jazzers here. You would have heard it in the Simpsons theme. So this is the scale. And you hear that last one sound stable. That didn't have to happen, but this is what happened in that piece of music. So in order for us to understand music and its power, let's think about this. That melody, for us to hear it, had to be passed down for generations and generations. Without notation or recording, it was only cradled by memories and air. So there must have been something in it that stuck. But we can't fully understand music without understanding sound. And I think sound is overlooked in its impact to the flashiest sight. Usually the analogy is that you're dropping a pebble into a pond and the waves ripple out and reach you, which is all beautiful and understandable. But sound is a three-dimensional wave that emanates. And it hits you fast. My words are hitting you at over 1,000 kilometers an hour. And some of those wavefronts are this big. And the wavefronts themselves, they're not these big waves. They're pushing forwards and backwards. But on the micro scale, I mean, thousandths of a width of a human hair, hardly past its own diameter of the molecule. And yet we hear, because it's a prize that evolution could not ignore. So our whole bodies and brains turn to it, this ability to see in the dark and behind objects. And so what you have is an ear, it might not be news to you, and these aren't just for hanging off decorations, they're for funneling the sound and putting them into the inner ear, where it hits the paper-thin tympanic membrane or eardrum, and then through a series of levers, the three smallest bones in the human body hit the cochlea and translate that sound wave into an electrical wave. I'd say like a microphone, but a microphone is like an ear. Biology invented it first. So it's even possible to get up close and trap that electrical wave and play it back. Well, not for me, but for people like Nina Kraus at her lab. And she kindly lent me these samples. So what you'll hear is the sound going in, and then the electrical wave, what they managed to retrieve, the sound. But these sound waves are super powerful. They can hold all the music you can imagine, all the music that ever existed on this little wiggly wave. But what's odd about it is that sound waves, as powerful as they are very weak and fragile. They disappear, even in this great hall, very quickly. So most of the sound of human history, or the Earth's history, is gone, from the dinosaurs to the Neanderthals, from Pythagoras to Paganini, are lost forever. Until in the middle of the 19th century, this French guy, you might not have heard of him because Edison was the famous person for capturing sound waves, but he was actually the first to do it. What he did was build this contraption called the phonautograph, the sound writing device. And it basically mimicked the human ear. It's got a funnel, it's got a series of levers, like the ossicles in the human ear, and then it wrote on a rotating, hand-rotated cylinder into soot, the sound wave. Here they are. Now, what's kind of sweet and tragic is that he had no idea how to play them back. So he's largely been forgotten. But here they were, the first recordings of sound. In fact, he didn't even think about the idea of playing them back. He thought of them as just a photograph of sound. But in 2007, a team managed to convert these back to sound. So this is the recording, please work, of the earliest human voice. Now, before we hear it, he's going to sing. He's not a professional singer, and is turning this crank into soot, for goodness sake. Also, he didn't think anyone would hear it again, not even himself. So it feels like a bit mean, all of us listening in. But here we go. You got it? Were you impressed by it? Okay. It wasn't me. But what I get is a real human connection to this person. And in fact, if you think about sound, for much of our history, sound was only local area. But now with this one moment, we have emancipated it from the local area, from time and space. And I feel a real connection to this guy, especially when he's larking about with some comic opera. Ready? So sweet. We have now long domesticated the sound wave. We can describe it in sort of numbers. We can put it onto electromagnetic tape, as Ruraguela lives. And it can even piggyback on radio waves, so it can go now at the speed of light and escape the air. So we can do things like take a child's voice, take that sound wave, hop it onto a radio frequency, bounce it against the moon, catch the reflection a few seconds later, which is what the Sister Moon project helped me do.
My name is Chloe and I'm 6.5. My name is Chloe and I'm 6.5.
Aww. And we've also wrapped it onto the Voyager golden disk. So it's now escaped our solar system, so that maybe extraterrestrials can make sense of music, and we can see if it's truly universal. So how do we make sense of sound? Okay, so this is what a sound wave looks like. It's got it's got time against amplitude. It's called an oscillogram. It's a writing of how it oscillates. And so you can get a sense of its shape, of its volume. But we don't really understand its content until we zoom in. If I stop it here, then you can see this is a tuning fork, but you can see that looks very much like a sine wave. It's a particular wave that zones in on one frequency. And inside our brains, we have areas that are called tonotopic. They're a gradient of frequency sensitivity. So this is focusing on our 440 hertz. It's a wavelength about this big. And you can hear it because it's burning a hole in that area. The wavelength determines the frequency in inverse and thus the pitch. So this is a better way of a better representation of how we actually listen. If we can think of this as time and frequency that way, then that note we heard is cutting across. We can put a piano there, but the piano is smooth in this case, so it's cutting across as an A. This is called a spectrogram, and it shows the amplitude in terms of brightness. So you can see there's some other junk in there as well, some dust of noise, and where I hit click at the end and forgot to edit it out. You can see it here. Of course, sounds are more complicated than that. Can anyone guess what this sound is from the look of it? Any guesses? Oh. This one, we can tell it's a musical instrument, or a musical pitched instrument, because of the harmonic regular steps between them. Harp, well, it comes in, a harp, it has a stronger attack. Anyway, what is it? This isn't a quiz. What am I doing? And this one, what starts with a click and then, sounds like a terrible joke, and then the harmonics diminish. Nadia should know. Piano. These are all the same note, but their shape of harmonics and above it helps us determine what's what. So if we take something like that, if we hear something like that, we're doing a number of abstractions. We can suddenly hear that this is a female voice, we'll find out. We can also tell that there's a melody. We can also tell that there are, see those changing shapes above it? These are different vowels. The white notes of and from that we can bring out musical elements like rhythm, change, and pitch over time, and timbre. It's extraordinary that we can do this. It's extraordinary that we can do this. More so that we can do it all at once. We can integrate and segregate all these sound objects. Let's see how good we are at doing this. Oh, you might know this. Look at that and see if you can hear, sorry about the distorted sample, but see if you can hear the sound in it, within it. Okay, try this one. You heard brainstorm, anyone? They're the same sample. We're just on the edge of integrating. It's been manipulated so it sounds just exactly halfway, so we can be primed into what we hear. It's that dress all over again. The point is that listening is both bottom up, what comes to us, and what we imagine it to be, how we are primed to hear. And musicians exploit this so beautifully. Like Ravel, who orchestrates in such a way that instead of just using this big force of instruments, he collates them. In this example, he puts the woodwind above the rest of the orchestra, but moves them in parallel rather than a musical diatonic motion. Why? Because that's how a church organ would sound. The harmonics would move together, and you can maybe see it here. And electronic musicians, this is their playground, because they can basically use it as a canvas and write whatever they want to. Some sneaky musicians actually hide pictures in there, and Aphex Twin fans have learnt to turn the sound waves into spectrograms to find these hidden messages. But we wouldn't do something so silly here, would we? Sounds like an 8-bit grasshopper. Now, sometimes music is called a language. And it's true that when we speak, we have musical qualities. We have rhythm, we use intonation. You can tell if I'm angry by the monotone and clipped voicings. You can tell if I'm being condescending, can't you? So we seem to understand this. So let's try this out. Could you just say this word, just naturally as possible? Good timing. Okay, let's try this one. Wait for me, ready? Better. And let's try this one, ready? Oh, that was good. Now, this is what you did, what most people do, which you had this descent for silver, this descent from microphone, but when you said the silver microphone, it was a melodic arch, as we saw in Roriguela. You see how silver was reversed because it's indicating that we're not at the end of the sentence. So let's try this one. Ready? So weird sector we're in. And oh, you're very good. So you did it perfectly. Did you notice that? Are you going to take it from there? Okay. You'll notice that when we ask a yes-no question, it goes up. And when we ask a WH question, like who or why, it tends to go down. How do we learn such strange things? We learn it as children. We do this naturally. When you talk to a child, we speak differently. So, for example, if I talk to you, I say, that's a microphone. But if I talk to a child, I would say, that's a microphone. So we're teaching them the hidden music of language. And it seems that music of language spills into the language of music. So, for example, French has a more even distribution of rhythms and pitches in their neighboring phonemes. That was a good sentence, and I got it through. So, comment allez-vous? Whilst English is more bouncy, how are you doing? Even I say it naturally, it has more melodic contour and differences in rhythm. And a large-scale study showed that was echoed in the music of English and French composers. And so musicians, unwittingly or not, are putting the music of language into their music. I like this moment from Elgar where he imitates the stutter and laughter of one of his friends in one of the variations here. And we have grammatical structure, question and answer. This is a famous example where we get that melodic arch but distributed between two instruments. But what people don't notice is that there is another hidden question and answer between the bass and itself. We have two arches at once, conversations at the same time. We also find sentence structures. For example, it's a common grammatical structure to say one thing, sort of elaborate on it, introduce some new material, and then come to some sort of conclusion, like I just did. And we hear this in music all through eras and styles. I could play you thousands, but we'll go with this one. And the resolution. Again, ready? So idea, variation, new idea, and conclusion. Seems so natural, right? Now let's look at the language of music. Yes. Because in some ways, music is not like all the languages. For example, there's an object, which we call the moon, and other languages have names for it, but it's still pointing to the same thing. There is no musical word for moon. I mean, you could turn the letters into a melody, like some weirdo like me would do that, or we could evoke the nature of the feeling of the moon, but there is no unambiguous word for moon. So what is the language of music? Well, let's pick this apart with an example from Bartók. Bartók was an incredible composer, but also contributed much to ethnomusicology. He adored folk music and would travel lugging around a huge Edison phonograph, which could record and play back, to capture literally nearly 10,000 pieces, transcribing them. He cared so much about it and he put it into his music. So here's a piece that he recorded. There's his field book with his transcription and some notes about it. And here's his recording. So he transcribed this many times, actually. There's about 5 different transcriptions. Sometimes he went into great detail about the intonation and the rhythm, changing tempo every bar. Other times he reduced it just to this elemental level. And in so doing, he's teaching us something, that music has this sonic canvas moment, this one-time performance with all its detail, but it also has this geometric language, the essence of a melody. If we reduced it down, what is that thing that's the same? Even if we play it in a different key or with a different instrument, what is that thing that is the same? So this is his later composition around this melody. And you can see that he's taken that motif and spread it out and still retained the character. I'm going to play this first. It's a tritone away, but it's completely recognizable. It's on a piano, not a voice. Dorian mode, by the way. So it seems that the language of music is these simple, likable, robust objects that can survive retelling and modification. There must be a point where you distort a melody and it becomes something else. But in the right hands, a melody can be extraordinary. I'm going to play you this example, which comes from an anthology of Lithuanian melodies, and see if you recognize it. Anyone recognize it? That's because Stravinsky had a copy of this book. And you can hear these melodies throughout the Rite of Spring. In fact, I don't think he even heard the original melody. So it shows how notation is a good home for these geometric shapes. So here's his version of it. I want to hear it all as well. And the malleability is extraordinary in the right hands. Take Gershwin's I Got Rhythm Variations, where he takes a 4-note motif and with hardly anything else creates this incredible introduction. He does extraordinary things to it, not just transposing or stretching, but stretching the gaps between them, turning upside down and backwards, stretching it so long that it becomes an accompaniment to itself. See how many that you can hear. Beautiful. So, now this is why you're here. How on earth does this become emotion? Sound, this decoding of sound, and the geometric shapes. It's true that music somehow makes our entire brains light up. Here's data from someone listening to Astor Piazzolla. We'll listen to a little bit of it. It's lighting up regions for auditory control, motor control, memory, prediction, visual cortices as well. Why all these things? The reason is our brains are supremely complex, but their mission statement is really simple, and that is survive. That's it. It just wants you to survive. Well, really your genes, but let's not be. So what is it about that? The brain wants you to survive, and what it's doing is it's encountering the world around it through its perceptual channels. So it perceives the world, and it brings it to the brain, and what the brain wants to do is what to do. We see someone running towards us or something running towards us. What the brain wants to do is the right thing in that situation. And usually it's just a positive or negative thing. Is that a good thing to have? Is that something worth encountering? Or is it something that you need to run away from? And it does this with an extraordinary predictive mode. This active inference that it does. And we'll explore that much more in the next lecture. But really, emotions, sorry to say, are just motivations to act. If we are scared, we'll freeze or run away. If we're angry, we might take a stance and attack. If we're hurt, we won't do that again. So the brain is just taking in the outside world, trying to predict best what's happening, and then releasing these emotions to make us act a certain way. Doesn't sound very romantic, does it? But music has an incredible set of trigger points in order to get to our emotional states. This is Jocelyn's Breck-Wemer model of some mechanisms which music uses to reach our emotional centers. They came up with this acronym of Breck-Wemer, and it makes sense because it's the order that you get it when you're in your child's development. But let's face it, it's a horrible acronym, sorry. So I prefer Everbeam because it seems to fit music's poetry. So let me talk through them. Episodic memory is essentially a retrieval cue. If we've had a really deep emotional experience and we hear some music, they can become bonded. Thank you for all your nostalgia responses in that survey. They were very moving. That's exactly what's happening. Like a smell, it connects a piece of music with an event that's important. Sometimes the piece of music doesn't matter, but sometimes it has meaning, or we retroactively put meaning on it. And usually it's quite sad, because even if it's a happy memory, it's gone. But if grief is love with nowhere to go, perhaps music gives it a home. I cried then. Perhaps music gives it some kind of home, and the only antidote is just to make more memories, I suggest. Vinyl crackle always helps for some reason. Visual imagery is when sound evokes a visual image, a landscape, spacious skies, but it also evokes, along with that programmatic, it evokes a sort of abstract world of turning and flying and dipping and diving. So Vaughan Williams' The Lark Ascending seems to do both as a pastoral setting, but it takes us on a flight. Emotional contagion, our survival value is to be able to recognize the emotion that someone else is feeling. This is useful when you're bonding with a child or out in the world with people who aren't so friendly. But we can hear that in music. Of course, when someone is singing, we adapt to it, but an instrument seems to be a surrogate for a voice. In fact, we can even take an electronic tone, a sawtooth wave, filter it a little bit, put some reverb, some portamento and vibrato, and we're suckers. We hear it as a human voice that we want to care for. Rhythmic entrainment comes from our need for communion, to work with others, to coordinate our own movement, but also in work activity. And when we hear rhythm, it taps into that thing, and we feel a sense of communal gathering. Stop having fun. Okay. Probably the most primal and the earliest mechanism is the brainstem reflex, and that's what's happening in our immediate environment, and it's usually scared. So it's a loud bang or a thunder, or the absence of it, it's happy. So music taps into that mechanism as well. Another mechanism is evaluative conditioning. Like Pavlov's dogs, we are constantly linking positive and negative associations to the world. That's how we survive. But in music also we do this in a really complex web, and screen and media writers know this really well. So for example, they will choose an upright piano over a grand piano to give a sense of homeliness. And the listener, most of the time, is completely unaware, but they're just brought along with these associations. We also get emotion about the music itself. That Bach could write a 6-part fugue, or that 6-year-old girl can play bossa so beautifully. So we can be moved by things around the music. For example, you might like Django Reinhardt's music, but understanding that he was born in poverty and in a caravan fire, burnt his right leg and his left hand hideously, so he only had 2 fingers of his fretting hand. But he held those 2 fingers up to fate and became an absolute virtuoso. And so when you hear him play, you hear sort of triumph alongside the music. Are you guys hearing everything okay? Good. We can pump it up a bit if you don't. This is the final one, and I suppose it's a mechanism exclusive to music. It's the predictive mechanism by which we understand where those geometric shapes are going. So if we set up a pattern, and it gets met, we feel a sense of reward. If it gets thwarted in some way, we might be confused or excited or curious about it. And I spend my whole life in this world, so I'm only allowed one example. So if you ever played on the piano and you've just missed a note, you will realize the one really close to the one you intended is the worst one to hit. And the reason is that the piano is not linear. For example, music tends to have a collection of tones that aren't next to each other on the piano. Let me provide some insight. So if we take this note here, it's a D, but it could be any of them. Now, what's the nearest note to that D is probably all the other Ds, right? Because there's this octave equivalence, almost universal. But the next nearest one is up a fifth, which I've kept mentioning in this talk. So we can put that there. But because octaves are equivalent, we can also go a fifth down and place that one there. We do that again, and what do we get but the pentatonic scale of Roroguela? I like that noise. What if we carry on here? We get the diatonic scale of I Know a Little Forest and countless other pieces. If we continue, of course, we complete this cycle of fifths. So the cycle of fifths is a pentatonic scale extending to a diatonic, and then this other hidden pentatonic scale on the other side. Interesting. And there's nothing special about those notes. You can rotate this and still create that structure. I like to think of it like a moon again, with the pentatonic scale and the diatonic scale in the light and this other mysterious hidden pentatonic. Extending outwards. And now this hidden pentatonic. So Debussy in Clair de Lune plays with these two sides. And we can hear a passage of Debussy as he orbits the moon, essentially. I think that brings us nicely to here. I sent out a survey ahead of this lecture about the chills, and I just want to say a few things about it. Our time is running out. All those everbeam mechanisms can combine. You can feel sad about through one pathway, scared through another, and delighted through a third. And that's why we have these profound effects. The chills is this experience at particular points of music that we love, where we get goosebumps and shiver down our spine. About half the population get them, but 90% of music students get them. So either that's exposure, or I prefer to think of it, the chills, as the siren call to music professionalism. Well, the people who responded to my survey, it was 96%, by the way. These are the pieces. Beethoven came out on top, but Vaughan Williams had the biggest, most requested pieces in Lilac Ascending and Fantasia on the theme of Thomas Tallis. Lot of Rachmaninoff, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, all over the place. But what is intriguing to me is the diversity. I couldn't put them all there. Only if they had two mentions, I could put it up there. So there's this huge range on what I'm calling now the Schubert Slipknot continuum. These are the sort of responses that I've pulled out. There are hundreds. And they sort of gravitate to these sort of themes. Catharsis, sudden change, usually from low to high, a sense of anticipation, build, communion, dissonance, These seemed quite at odds with each other, but they are surprisingly consistent in the literature. A resolution that gives you what you want but twists something. Why? Why do we get the chills? Well, this theory is that we get chills temperature-wise when we're going from hot to cold or cold to hot. It seems odd, but that's what happens. But similarly, we get chills if we're in a safe place going to an unsafe place. If we turn a corner and we're lost and we hear footsteps. Or if we think things are unsafe, like we're surprised at a birthday party and we think things are fine. That is, if you like birthday parties. And then you're happy at the end. And so what we find with music that gives us chills is usually there's an opposition, a dissonance that suddenly releases. Or most particularly, this high frequency associated with Hammond organ, church organs, strings, vocals are usually associated. And this hypothesis is that's connected to the cry of a baby's voice. There's a particular register from 2 to 4 kilohertz that is alerting. If you've not heard a baby in a while, this is what they sound like. Annoying, isn't it? They're fine. You hear that? So you want to attend to it, don't you? It's because it's got this region here, and music gives us chills, seems to excite that. We have to be alert to it, and as if suddenly finding or resolving the issue becomes this release, and we get these chills. So here's some isolated vocals, Mary Clayton, extraordinary backing vocalist. And if you watch that square, you'll hear these squeaks right in that zone.
Rape murder! It's just a shadow wave! It's just a shadow wave! Rape murder! Yeah! It's just a shadow wave! It's just a shadow wave! Rape murder! It's just a shadow wave! It's just a shadow wave! Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Five minutes, okay, so I'll just take one example and break it apart, because this came up a lot, and it's one that happens to give me chills also. So I'll show you all the contrasting ways that it might create this chill moment. For example, Eclipse comes right at the end of an album that is suggesting D major, but never quite gets there. It hangs around in modal territory or in relative minors or in parallel minors or relative minors of those parallel minor, but finally we get to this D major, so there's a catharsis. There are these associations of being preached at, because you get the church organ and the soulful vocals. There's this twisted resolution where it hits the word son, and you think it's the end of the sentence, but it carries on. If you don't know this tune, this might feel like nothing, but if you do, it'll feel like a lot. Rhythmic entrainment is this waltzing 6/8 rhythm, but really strong binary landing points. And every time we go round the cycle, we bring in another vocalist and another vocalist. It builds and builds, and this communion and communion. The chord sequence has 2 chords from the light side, 2 chords from the dark side of the moon. So we get those mysterious moments, and it just turns and turns and turns. Hopefully it will be impactful to some degree like this. Turn it up. And I'll show you, I've tried to highlight some of these moments. So you came here to discover why music moves us, and I'll answer it as plainly as I can. Music moves us because it engages with our primal instincts to survive, to protect, to love, to defend, to predict. And so music engages with what we are as a species. Music also relies on this complex web of associations, musical, cultural, historic. And so it reflects where we are in culture and time. And finally, music engages with our own personal stories, your stories, lives that will never be lived again. All your lives, their loves, dreams, and pains. And so finally, music reflects who we are. Thank you so much.
So I've got a few questions which we've sort of, there's a little button you might have seen on your screen where you could
Sorry, I got this.
you can predict some frequencies. So the more common ones I'll go first. During your research for this, what was the most surprising or counterintuitive thing that you came across in trying to relate music to emotion?
The baby's cry was a shock and obvious in retrospect. There's so many things that are obvious in retrospect. What we take for granted about musical structure, and particularly the links with language, I find that fascinating. Well, I read about 15 big books on this, so I've learnt from all of them, but I think that how it can be explained just by quite simple mechanisms of wanting to survive. It seems simplistic, but once the complexity of music comes in, it's a very convincing argument for the tapestry of motion that music can create.
So I think we've all experienced this. So you get a song that means a lot to you, is meaningful in some way, but then turns into an earworm that you can't go, what happens when something becomes a real driver for you to want to do?
Well, I said geometric shapes, and what else has geometric shapes but Tetris? Anyone who's played Tetris will know that those get hooked as well. Music is also sequential, so if you ever rehearse music, it's very hard to do it from beat 2.5. You want to go from the beginning. So it's this process, this domino effect that happens, and so once we hear it, we have to continue it, and so we're really working out the process and the sort of logic, and it's really hard to let those go. If they're intriguing or still puzzling, we're still working on them.
You're still trying to get Miles Davis out of your head just now.
Yeah, I'll leave him in there, though.
Yeah. This is a question which I think is quite important. Why does achingly sad music sometimes make you feel better if you're already sad?
Okay, that's a brilliant question. It's one slide that I didn't allow myself. But this is the interesting thing. Sometimes music, when you see a cooking program, this is going somewhere, I promise. They score it as if it's energetic and it's sad, so you make it angry music. It's sad and slow, so you kind of move these simple parameters. But the reality about music is that some of the most heartbreaking music is in a major key. And it's because you see music as a friend, I think. And I don't know if you ever lost someone, but it's when someone's kind to you, that's when you cry. Why am I crying? But that's the effect. And the reverse is true. Someone is acknowledging how angry you feel. And so it feels so great to hear Shostakovich's String Quartet No. 8, because it's everything that you feel inside, and someone is expressing it on your behalf.
So, which brings us to why composers construct musical chords. I mean, they're not presumably, or they're not thinking of the technical reasons for this is happening, but they do evoke certain spiritual experiences. So, if somebody here says, well, think back to a Gregorian chant, it creates an atmosphere, an emotion, all of its own, yet surprisingly simple music. How do you move from that to the more complex code without this
we have to remember that, like I said, music reflects where we are. And listening to Gregorian chants 400 years ago is different from hearing them today. We have this set of expectations. So distorted guitar used to sound distorted, now it sounds wholly accessible. Tapping on 2 and 4 is completely normative, which was originally a syncopation, perhaps. So composers are looking to please, but also to surprise. And so as we go through history, we find these turns. And it's not a linear thing either. Usually we find great innovations happening by reaching back in the past, like Ligeti's Lux Eterna is essentially Renaissance writing with a chromatic language. And so composers are always looking ways to reward listening, but also delight and innovate.
So I'd like to see if we've got time to take one more question from the audience. If anybody wants to put their hand up, we have a microphone. Oh, we've got one already. Fantastic.
Hi, good evening. I was just wondering, are some people more moved by music than others?
More moved.
Moved. Did you say moved?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, does music affect some people more than other people?
It's hard to gauge such things. I mean, clearly just by reporting that seems to be the case. I do think that almost everyone has the capacity to be deeply moved by music, and we shouldn't associate certain composers with their capacity to move. Just like we all have the capacity to be heartbroken or fall in love or feel angered, I think we all have the capacity to find music that triggers those depths of emotion.
Thank you. I'd once again like to thank all of you for turning up, to thank Milton for putting up with some hiccups, and what a triumph. And we look forward to your next one. Milton Mermikides.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much.